Great, great. Well, thank you for being here. Let's see, before I get started, since we're kind of a small group, I'd love to get a feel for who we have in the room. Let's see, how many of you are currently taking a translation or localization related class right now? Okay, so the rest of you, I assume, are exploring. Okay, see some nods. Great, great. And, okay, let's see, what types of languages do we have here? Do we have, how many speakers of European or Latin American languages do we have? Okay. What, Asian languages? Okay. Other languages?
HTML.
Fantastic. That's also very helpful in localization. So, excellent, excellent. Yeah, whether it's a programming language or a markup language or the language of business, there are a lot of languages that really help in the localization industry. So today I want to talk about trends, opportunities, and actually advantages that you have as soon-to-be BYU graduates in the localization industry. But to start, let's talk a little bit about what localization is. I know many of you already know, but perhaps this example will give you a little bit more perspective. Sometimes the word localization is used interchangeably with the word translation, but in general it's more. It's more than that. As an example of how it's more than just translation or language, you can look at what happened with a US president not too long ago when he was looking for a gift to give to a UK Prime Minister. This gift was in English, which of course the UK Prime Minister would understand. It was a box set of 25 popular all-American movies, DVDs, in fact. And yeah, that's great, okay. Certainly, he could watch those, have no problem understanding them. However, there's a problem. DVDs on this side of the Atlantic come in one format, and DVDs on the other side come in another format. So they don't sell DVD players over in the UK that play our types of DVDs. Guess which type of DVD was given to this Prime Minister? One that would not work at all in the UK. So, it was a little bit of embarrassment. There was a lot of criticism of the gift-giving department at the White House at the time. But yeah, so it's not, getting products and services to people is not just about understanding the language, but there's more to it. There can be technical issues, cultural issues, quite a bit more. So some key definitions, of course, that you need to know, and many of you already know this. Translation is written transfer from one language to another, as opposed to interpreting, which is spoken. Localization, it's often talked of as not just translation, but also adaptation for that particular market or locale. And that adaptation can be technical, cultural, linguistic, legal even. Then there's some other terms that I'll mention here as well. One is internationalization. How many of you have heard a lot about internationalization as it relates to localization? Okay, several of you. Internationalization is different. I know it sounds quite a bit alike, but that is more preparation or even standardization or neutralization that will then make localization a whole lot easier. It's easier to adapt something to another culture if it starts out easily adaptable and doesn't have a lot of problems associated with it to begin with. Because then you not only have to adapt it, but you have to fix a whole bunch of problems. So that's internationalization. That will make localization faster, cheaper, easier. And then all of this is often called together globalization, which includes this and a lot of other things, whatever it takes to take a product and distribute it globally. Then you'll often, being in an industry of language nerds, of course we're going to come up with some abbreviations or acronyms for this, even non-word nerds love to do this. So you'll see these abbreviations, these acronyms. Localization is abbreviated L10n, simply because there are 10 letters between the L and the N. I18n is that way simply because there are 18 letters between the I and the N. So you already understand half the lingo in the industry there. But yeah, and of course, some of you are just begging to correct me and say, no, those aren't abbreviations or acronyms, they're numeronyms. Okay, they're numeronyms. All right. There are a lot of different types of things that need localization. For those of you who attended the presentation on Disney localization last night, so many of those things include video games and toys. Even little Iron Man toys that kids will wear on their wrist, those can require localization. And quite a bit more. Courses, novels, surveys, marketing text, websites, all kinds of things that can require localization. So if one of these really does not interest you, there's probably something else that really does. You don't have to stick with localizing something that you find completely boring and unfascinating. One of the easiest ways to describe what localizers do, whether they are linguists, managers, or engineers, is to look at what happens when you don't have professional localizers fixing things. So for example, some of you have seen the Zeroing video game from back in the day that came out with translations like this. Including the very famous one coming up next, all your base are belong to us. Yeah, you've seen that, you've heard that. What you say? Us? Right? You have no chance. Okay. Yes, take off every zig. You know what you're doing. Move zig. Clear as day, right? Okay, there are often a lot of problems that happen when you do that. You know what? And sometimes that actually works out to the favor. From what I hear, this was a pretty mediocre video game that died out in popularity very quickly, but it's had a cult following ever since, simply because of this all your base or belong to us. Some of you may even remember when a large company here in Utah, Omniture, was purchased by Adobe, and Adobe put up these signs saying, all your base belong to us. So that was just right off the I-15. So every once in a while, if you're lucky, it'll, one of these mess-ups will work in your favor, but hopefully you don't have to take that gamble. There are other instances. Sometimes it's not necessarily a failure in localization. Sometimes it is a failure in that preparation, which of course a localizer would have identified. But that preparation, again, can be technical, cultural, or linguistic. In one instance, there was a Japanese voice-over IP software company. They were creating phone software that would sit on your mobile device or your PC to facilitate online calls. And they did really, really well in Japan. Incredibly well. They had a lot of success. And then after all that success, they wanted to expand into the US and elsewhere. And they found, maybe we should have thought about that expansion before we decided on things like the name of our product, which was called the PP phone. Normally you don't adapt brand names to a particular new region. You usually keep them the same. But in this case, keeping that the same caused a lot of problems. Every time somebody was telling the new market about their PP phone, people would just have a hard time listening to them after they heard the brand name. It didn't pass the snicker test, as some people would say. Right, but not everybody fails at this. Some people do really well. Microsoft, for example, when they came up with the Bing brand, they did their homework. They did this preparation and found that the name Bing was actually great. It had positive or neutral connotations every single place that they went, except China, where it had characters, Chinese characters that sounded like Bing, had connotations like diseased or frozen. Not exactly the most positive thing. You don't want to think of things freezing when you're trying to use an online search engine. It's frustrating. So, but because they did their homework, they knew about this, and they were able to take appropriate action. They found, if we just add one extra Chinese character to this, the pronunciation's a little bit different. It's pronounced then Biying, wow, listen to these connotations. Those characters come from the last two characters of a Chinese proverb meaning ask and you shall find. So the new direct translation was certain to respond or ready to answer. Not bad connotations for a new search engine, right? So, getting the right people involved, getting localizers involved makes quite a difference, and you can see quite the contrast. They're not going to have nearly the trouble with PP function. Sometimes we attempt to say one thing, but we communicate the opposite because we don't have localization professionals involved. Such as here, where people are trying to say, hey, we can communicate with you. How reassuring is that they will really be able to really communicate with you? That's not so reassuring. But, sometimes we laugh and we say, oh, these silly shopkeepers that, these tiny little stores making fools of themselves. But you know what? Large companies do this too, in different ways. I'll point this out playing a little game where we look at some websites, and this game is, where's the language selector? When you go onto a website and it's not the language you want, you want to be able to quickly just look up, usually in a particular corner, and say, okay, I can change it to the language I need. All right? If we go to this website, I don't really see anything here. Do you see where you can change it to your language? Anybody? Maybe down here on the left? Kind of buried. Visit other AMP sites, but of course, if you don't actually read English, how easy is it going to be to find this buried on this English website? Or this one. This is actually clear as day. All right? It's in the top right corner. That's handy, that's good location, but you can all read that and understand exactly that's the button you need to click, right? In order to get the language you need. It says, look, it says English. It does. It's not in English. So, sometimes this happens in so many websites where it tells you, okay, yeah, click over here, and you're telling a Japanese speaker in English, click here for Japanese. That doesn't help as much. All right, tons of these examples. I want to show you another fun little example here. Hear this. I don't necessarily endorse all of this guy's material, but this is a great little point for localization here.
I got a chance to experience an amusement park that was a little different. It was an alternative park called Gatorland. It's a real park, and I've met the owners, and they're really cool people, but I got to tell you, the best part about this amusement park is they have a recording. The funniest thing I've ever heard. You call this park, this is what you hear. Yeah! Enrich Gatorland, America's premier gator extravaganza. You've seen them on TV, now come see them live. Gatorland, you're going to love this park. Then he says this, for Spanish, press 2. Oh, I gotta hear this. I don't speak Spanish, but you're gonna love this park.
All right. Yeah, sometimes we think that, or we lead people to believe, yeah, we can communicate with you, and maybe we can't, or the other way around. Let's see here. Oops. Okay, Microsoft just died. No, we're good. All right. So those are some of the the cultural and more the linguistic things, and even just some practical common sense things that need to be applied in localization. There are a lot of other technical issues that you need to be aware of as well. Sometimes some of you perhaps have tried looking at a web page and found that it looks like just garbled characters. This right here, for example, is an example of what the Japanese called mojibake. How do you pronounce it? Mojibake. Where, you know, those were originally intended to be Japanese characters. But are those Japanese characters? No. It's just a bunch of garbled text. And garbled, yeah, just junk characters is what it's often called. Because there's a bit of an encoding issue there, right? If you don't have the technical expertise to prevent these kinds of errors, these can ruin your most important days. So just here, where this is actually a wedding cake that's supposed to say congratulations in Thai for the Thai bride that's marrying an English-speaking groom. What happened? An email was sent with the Thai text, congratulations, to the baker, the cake decorator, and they didn't see exactly what they intended to see. So they put these junk characters that mean absolutely nothing on it for a wedding day. Oh, that'd be frustrating. Can be embarrassing. Has anybody ever seen the BBC TV series called Episodes? No? Okay. The Matt Blanc, the guy from Friends. Anyways. So they had an interesting episode that involved a Jewish funeral. And at this funeral, they tried to make an authentic tombstone here, that had both English and Hebrew. English said something about beloved husband and father. The Hebrew actually was backwards. Because Hebrew is written from right to left instead of left to right. They didn't know this. They didn't have the technical expertise to get it to display correctly. But, you know, actually being backwards kind of hid the fact that they'd gotten a really lousy machine translation that instead of saying beloved husband and father and all that, said that he was pickled at great expense. But there's good news. Even though they really messed this up, yeah, the series is a comedy. So it actually grew hugely in popularity in Israel after this because people thought that was hilarious, and so they wanted to check out the rest of it. Even if that wasn't intentional. Right? Sometimes it can be more than just embarrassing for a moment. Sometimes that embarrassment can stick with you for life. As in this case, where people decided to get some Hebrew tattoos. Every single one of these tattoos is backwards. Every single one. Including this one that just means nothing. It's complete gibberish. Who knows how you got that? So there's some fun, adventurous technical challenges that can be avoided when you have proper professional localization engineers and others involved. There's some other things that are just very practical. You know, if someone is translating some text in an online application or something, sometimes that text is surrounded by a lot of codes so that it can display things that will, in a more customized manner. Where, for example, this might be on a social network like Facebook, where you say, okay, you know what, a particular user, and that's, you know, got the placeholder for this user, has approved you, or if about somebody else, that other person, as a, you know, friend or coworker, whatever. You've received these approval messages before. But if you were a translator, how would you translate those 4 words in blue? Because that's all that needs translation. In your language, how would you translate those four words? Yikes, good luck, especially with the logic in there, because it's not always going to come out the same. It's not always going to be, he approved her as a friend. It could be, he approved you as a friend. It could be, he approved you as, you know, coworker or spouse. whatever it may be, and certainly the translation would be entirely different. And what if actually those same, what if those same words are even used in different contexts? Good. So yeah, that can create a lot of problems. So localization engineers and others need to find ways to say, hey, you know what? This isn't really translatable. How can we actually have something in the product that will be translatable and not looking like this? Other times you need to just, maybe the text isn't broken up as terribly as this, but you still need to just get it out of all the other code. File format that's very common for holding translatable text in all these web-based applications and websites that we see is XML. And a translator may not really want to look at this XML. Right? That can be a pain. Even if they understand it all, it's distracting. It creates a lot of risk that, oh, what if I accidentally hit the wrong thing and deleted a piece of the code? What happens? You break it, and it won't show up. So, on the technical side, people can be involved in using various different tools that will take out that text and display just the text that needs translation. Find the translator to work with that in an environment that helps them out. This is a translation tool that will show glossary matches and things. And then insert the translation. By the way, it's not a real translation, just some example characters. Insert that in while protecting all the other code. And so there are a lot of things that need cultural help, not just technical help, and not just linguistic help, in adapting things for other cultures. On the cultural side of things, there are a lot of fun issues to deal with. Sometimes there are images in a product, like a play button or a pause button. And, culturally, some of those buttons as images might be very easy to adapt. Instead of, or not even adapt, but just leave the same. So, because most other countries would understand that. But then there are other images that can be very dangerous. One of my European colleagues still remembers when, back in the day, Apple had on Mac computers, there was a recycle bin that did not look like a trash can, at least not a European trash can. It looked a whole lot more like a mailbox. So you can imagine, if users were confusing a messaging application with a recycle bin, what kind of frustrations and problems were they facing? Sometimes there are not just cultural but political issues that need to be taken into account. Microsoft, for example, was shipping some software to India, and let's see, actually in that operating system they were shipping, there was an 800,000 pixel map that had just a little small part that included India, and Microsoft had colored pixels a very different shade on the edge of India there to represent the disputed Kashmiri territory as not being Indian. It's a different color than the rest of India. And many of you know that Pakistan and India have been fighting over Kashmiri territory for a long time. So India banned Windows 95 software. And 200,000 copies had to be recalled in order to build diplomatic links. Imagine the expense there. And I'm sure there were people in Microsoft who were saying, hey, why didn't you just ask us about this? This is our role, we're localizers. In another instance, Microsoft let out was going to release a video game, a computer game, it's a little older, that included some chanting of the Quran in the background. You know what? They actually showed this to a linguist, and he said, no, wait, please don't send that. But the manager said, who's really going to know this? So they did that, and the Saudi government banned the game and demanded an official apology, and 75,000 copies of that game had to be recalled and destroyed. All right, so you can see that there is a need for people in both technical, cultural, linguistic, managerial roles to help out with localization in many different organizations. So this industry is growing. It's growing quite a bit. Common Sense Advisory is a research firm that covers our industry quite a bit. They estimated back in 2010 it was a $26 billion industry for language services, translation and localization, and interpreting as well. This year they've estimated it at approximately $38 billion. In 2019, estimated it will be almost a $50 billion industry, which is actually pretty sizable. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS in the U.S., estimates, when estimating job growth between 2012 and 2022, looking at all occupations, they're estimating growth of about 11%, all around. Not for localization and translation, we're talking everything, from plumbers to whoever. By comparison, computer and information system managers, those jobs were estimated to increase a little bit more. Software developers, twice as much. They estimated that jobs for translators and interpreters would increase in this time 46%. They didn't specifically estimate job increases for localization managers and localization engineers because not everybody even considers that. In fact, that's led many people to, but I would imagine it's pretty similar. But when they don't think of it, that's led a lot of people to say, you know what, this is the biggest industry that you've never heard of. And really, how many of you have really known a whole lot about localization for a long time? I didn't know. Okay, well, he's been around a while. Thank you for visiting. But I can tell you, I did not go to my to career day at kindergarten saying, when I grow up, I want to manage localization projects. People don't know about it. All right. Fortunately, BYU has some unique advantages in preparing you for this industry. Some of those are obvious to you, but maybe you don't know just how great those advantages are. You know that about 75% of our 30,000 student, large student body speaks a second language. Maybe you don't know just how cool that is, okay? In Europe, yeah, it's a lot easier to find, universities where maybe 50% or more of the students speak 2 languages or more. But in the US, it's not that common. Any schools that do have really high percentages of bilingual speakers are much smaller. Like the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey, where I teach, maybe about 99% of our students speak a second language, but we only have about 700 students. We're really focused on that. And you might get similar numbers if you looked at the language majors here at BYU. Right? This other college that's half the size and one of the most multilingual in the US, you only get up to about 60%. BYU really has a huge strength in this. You get students who are not just specialized and really interested in languages, like at my school. You get students who are interested in language and a lot of other things. We know that you have many interests. You might be interested in language and management, language and technology, language and culture, language and design, whatever it may be. BYU has additional advantages in our location. How many have heard of Utah referred to as the Silicon Slopes? Okay, that's becoming more commonly referenced. You know what Silicon Valley is, right? Okay. We're in the Silicon Slopes because we have actually a large and growing tech industry. And according to many studies, one of the fastest growing job markets. Utah's growth in localization, and in particular BYU's growth, in localization has not just been very recent. Certainly we've seen a lot of great things happening here with the club forming this last year and creating a lot of great opportunities for students interested in translation and localization. But this started even longer, well before that. Back in the 70s, BYU was one of the world's only institutions looking at advanced translation technologies. There's something called the Translation Sciences Institute. And that's spoken of fairly frequently nowadays when talking about advances in technology over the years. In the 1980s, when that Translation Sciences Institute disbanded, a lot of companies were kind of spun off. A lot of those former members of the group started some companies and created the very first instances of modern translation technology tools like what translators and localizers use today. Including, for those of you who know what translation memory is, first commercially available instance of translation memory. In the 1990s, there was a bit of a software boom here with WordPerfect and Novell. Novell in the 90s eventually had the second largest budget in the world for localization. Now, even though Novell and WordPerfect aren't nearly as large as they once were, there's been a lot of maturing in the localization industry here. We have a number of localization technology firms here that are well known, including Lingotech and Multiling and a smaller one, Western Standard. Multiling here in Provo is one of the world's 20 largest localization companies. A couple of years ago, they attracted $10 million in investment, which was not as common in the industry elsewhere. And then even the church has made quite a few significant advances in translation technology that are really leading the way. I'll mention that again in just a second. So all of this has created an environment where the localization club can thrive, where now we have a professional association. Many of you attended the meeting last night, and it's not hard to get a lot of great professionals in the room here because we have a lot of talented localization professionals here in Utah that you can learn from. So yeah, it's creating a lot of opportunity. Not many schools, not many undergraduate institutions could organize something like Localization Lab. Not many schools could, when needed to earlier this year, hire 4 excellent adjunct professors, Jeff Beatty, Dan Higginbotham, Dale Elliott, Aaron Alder, to be able to come on and teach the courses that you are learning. Right? So all this opportunity means that you can prepare yourselves for a lot of different types of career opportunities in localization. There are many different types of jobs that you can do in localization. If one of these sounds terrible to you, there are plenty of others that really might interest you. You want to combine your language skills with something else. It's not just translators, not even just managers, and not just engineers. There are also terminologists, audio and video engineers, subtitlers. You can be an entrepreneur and start your own company. If somebody wants to know about that, you can talk to Leilani here. Okay. And a lot of BYU grads, even before we started getting this momentum for localization more specifically here, a lot of BYU grads have been combining these skills in language, technology, and business in order to have localization careers at many of the world's great companies. BYU grads have all worked in localization at these companies and many more. So what are those skills that you need to bring together? Again, it's often a combination of business, communications and language, and technology in some form or another. Sometimes more in one, less in the others, but usually a combination of all 3. Just an example of some of the cool things that you can do. Let's take a look at some of the BYU graduates who are working in localization. So, for example, Romina Castromel. She's a project manager at Lingotech, and having personally worked with her, I can tell you she's combining her language skills with, oops, I read this one, with organizational skills, and actually what I meant to write up here was her ability to stay calm under pressure. So she's able to complete very intense, manage very intense localization projects while remaining calm, not freaking out, and helping to keep her whole team very calm. It's another example of somebody on the management side. Some of you have met Tyler Smith. He's an operations lead in the church's localization department. He's combining language with problem solving. He's looking to see, okay, what are some of these problems that we're having? What are some of the opportunities for improvement? And then he's being tasked with finding how they can improve all their processes to overcome these particular challenges. I'm going to look at the big picture and get down in the weeds as well. All right, somebody else from another grad who actually will be out at one of those tables for Lingotech, Noelle Gibbons. She combines her language skills with organizational skills and being able to read people. She's a vendor manager, and one of the best I've worked with. She's fantastic at, when we would have, say, hey, you know what, we're going to have this $250,000 project coming up. It's going to be a lot of translators in these particular languages and these particular skill sets. She's excellent at saying, okay, great, so here's what we have, here's what we need. Here's how long it's going to take me to recruit these additional translators. And then she can go through and do a lot of research, find exactly who's going to be the best. She's able to talk to them and look at their resumes and say, okay, yeah, these are the ones who are going to be a great fit and have the skills for this project. These ones not so much. And then put them through the testing process to confirm. And so that ability to be well organized, to read people well, really helps her to ramp things up for these really big projects. Some of you met last year Barry Olson, who for a long time was a conference interpreter, and still is, for the State Department, and he's interpreted for many heads of state around the world, often traveling to do that. He's using those language and interpreting skills, combining those with leadership skills and technology skills, has become a tech entrepreneur. He started up a company that is enabling organizations and interpreters to provide simultaneous interpreting online. It's not as easy as it sounds, because you don't want, if you have a group of people that are speaking 4 or 5 different languages, you don't want them all talking over each other on the same line. You can divide it up to many different lines and still be able to organize it well. And he's helping his company to figure that out. Some of you have met Jeff Beatty, another grad, who's combined his language skills with engineering skills and people skills to motivate others. That's allowed him to, he and some of his colleagues and Mozilla, they just yesterday set a record for the most localized product launch in open source history, releasing in 44 different languages on their first release for when they released Firefox for iOS yesterday. So, pretty cool. Some of you have also met Steve Richardson. He's another BYU grad, who's head of translation systems at the church. So he's combining his language skills with his technology skills and leadership skills. Before he was in this position, he was actually head of machine translation for Microsoft when they were building the Microsoft Bing translator. Now he's taking that and he's on the cutting edge at the church. Maybe you don't know this, but the church is really on the cutting edge of, Norm Dan can tell you about this as well, of using machine translation, combining that with human editors to, not just any machine translation, not just the stuff you see online, but customizing it specifically for a type of text, like the text that the church needs to translate, and being able to still put out quality that's good enough while cutting time and costs in many cases by up to half. And so that's actually, the church is doing that. And last I heard from him, 19 or 22 languages, and still growing. Dan would probably correct me on that. But yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. One more. Oops, he's not a vendor manager, sorry. He's a senior vice president of sales. Russell Trout's Colonics is vice president of sales. He's combining his language with his ability to manage relationships and set a lot of goals so that he can close multi-million-dollar deals. And so hopefully this tells you, look, there are a lot of opportunities for BYU grads, especially with your skill set, your location, the connections and opportunities that you have here. A lot of things that you can possibly do with your language skills and other interests in the localization industry and in related services. And I think, personally, I think that you will be blessed as you try to do that, because we've even been given a mandate from a prophet now 40 years ago. Spencer W. Kimball came and gave a BYU devotional and said, one peak of educational excellence that is highly relevant to the needs of the church is the realm of language. BYU should become the acknowledged language capital of the world. And in a lot of that, he was talking about language education, learning languages. But he was also referencing some of the cool things that Alan Melby here and others were doing at the time with computer-assisted translation technology. So, my opinion, I think that not only is BYU well suited for this, but I think that we'll be blessed as we try to do this. As you gain these skills, you go out and you have an impact internationally, not just professionally, but as ambassadors for BYU. So I'm excited to see what happens with you, and it's so great to see how far things have come just in recent years, with so many of you learning so quickly about localization, getting so well prepared, forming this fantastic club that I have yet to see at any undergraduate school, that any undergraduate institution has such a fantastic club that's really helping to prepare you, not just meeting up for cookies and punch, but I think that they do go to other places. And if you'd like to talk with me or any of the other professionals here about what kinds of opportunities there are for you, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. Or you can feel free to reach out to me. You can still email me at adam.wooten@byu.edu in the meantime. But thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the localization lab event.